Hello friends, my name is AJ and welcome to my channel. This is going to be a new series which I am starting called Framework Fridays. So every Friday I'm going to be going over a new framework for Swift and iOS apps, and I will teach you how to use them. So this is going to become a new weekly thing, and today the first one that I'm going to be starting with is a framework called SwiftKeychainWrapper. And if you watch my last video on Wednesday, which was using UserDefaults, SwiftKeychainWrapper is another way to be able to store data on a user's device so that you'll be able to access it later. Now, the thing is with UserDefaults, which I mentioned in a pinned comment in that video, is that using saving passwords, such as if you're trying to implement a feature such as save password, or remember my password, then usually using UserDefaults may not be the most secure way to do it. And what SwiftKeychainWrapper does is it actually allows us to use the iOS keychain to be able to store data. So it's a little bit more secure. And well, without further ado, let's get started. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to actually create a new Xcode project. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it to my desktop and make sure that you remember where you actually save your project. So I'm just going to call this Keychain Demo. And I will save it to my desktop. Okay, so now that it is saved, I want to install the actual package or the actual framework of SwiftKeychainWrapper to my Xcode project. So in order to do this, you actually have to completely close out of Xcode. And what you're going to do is you're going to open up the terminal. We will install our frameworks using terminal and using something called CocoaPods. CocoaPods is a very easy way to install hundreds of frameworks to your iOS application. It is very easy. It's only the command line, and it requires minimum amount of coding in the terminal, which is why I think it's very good, especially for people who may not be familiar with other ways to do it and if they're actually installing frameworks for the first time. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is if you don't have CocoaPods installed on your computer, you want to type in sudo gem install CocoaPods, just like that. And you're going to click enter here, and this will install CocoaPods for you. It may ask you for a password, and you will have to type in the password to your computer in the actual field that shows up. Now, when you're typing your password, you're not going to see it, so make sure that you're typing each key correctly, and then when you're done typing in your password, press enter. It's a little bit more secure, so you don't actually see what you're typing when you're typing in your password, but you are actually typing. So even if you are hitting things and you're not seeing anything appear, you are typing it. So make sure to type it properly and maybe go slowly on your keyboard so you don't make a typo, and then press enter to confirm your password. Once you type in sudo gem install CocoaPods, and once everything occurs after you type in that command, then CocoaPods will be installed. And now we want to install the framework using CocoaPods. So the thing is I'm not running the sudo gem install CocoaPods command because I already have it on my computer. And since I have it, I don't need to actually install it again. And I will probably be making a video explaining CocoaPods in a little bit more detail probably next week. But for right now, if you install it, then we'll be able to actually use it when installing frameworks into our app. So the first thing to do is, in order to install a framework into our app, you actually want to go to the folder. You can close out of terminal. And you want to go to the folder right here where your project is saved. And what you're going to do is you're going to right click on it, and on the bottom you'll see something that says new terminal at folder. So you're going to click new terminal at folder. And basically what this means is that my terminal is now open and the directory has changed to this folder right here. Now, if you want to see all of the files inside of the directory, you can type in the ls command, and it will list all of the files inside of that folder. You can see that I have my 4 files here. This is a folder. Then I have a .xcode project, and then these are also folders. If there's no file extension at the end, then it is a folder. If you ever want to access a folder, you can do cd, which is change directory, and then type in the name of the folder to actually open that folder. But we do not need to do that. We just need to be here. So if you see these files, then you are good. Like if you see the Xcode project file, everything's good. Now what you want to do is you want to type in pod, P-O-D, space, init, I-N-I-T, or initialize. You're going to click enter, and then you will see that a new line there's now a new line here. What you want to do is you want to open up your Keychain demo folder or whatever folder of your project. Now you have this new pod file that has been generated using the pod init command. So I'm now going to open up my pod file. And inside of my pod file, you see here that there is this little, the pound symbol or hashtag symbol, and then pods for Keychain demo. So underneath this comment, right, you want to actually type in a certain thing in order to specify which pod you actually want to install. And so what you're going to do is you're going to type in pod and make sure it's lowercase because I'm in a text file. If you notice, Apple likes to auto capitalize it. I don't want it to be auto capitalized, right? Pod lowercase, and then I'm going to type in SwiftKeychainWrapper. Make sure not to have any misspellings here. SwiftKeychainWrapper. Once you've typed this into your file, just click Command S to save your file and then close out of text edit. And now you want to also close out of this folder. So now back in your terminal, where on this line below it, now if you closed your terminal, no worries, you can just again right click and click new terminal at folder and continue on. But if you have it open, then you want to go to your next line and you're going to type in pod and then this time install. And this will install the pod. If you look up here through all of this writing in different colors, you can see in green this is installing SwiftKeychainWrapper. And then it says, see here, pod installation complete. So that will install our pod. So now we will not need terminal for the rest of this. Terminal is only used for working with CocoaPods. Now I'm going to open up our folder. And now you also see a new file has been generated. Well, really three. You have a new pods folder. You have a podfile.lock file. And then you have this new keychaindemo.xc workspace. Whenever now you are going to work with your app, after installing anything from CocoaPods, you always want to use your XC workspace now. This is the file that will actually open your project. No longer the RX or the Xcode project, it is now the XC workspace file. So when you open up your XC workspace, now on the side you have the Keychain demo project, and then you have the pods project. You can now expand your Keychain demo just like this, and now you have access to your project like normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do something very similar as the video for user defaults. And because SwiftKeychainWrapper is so easy to use, it's actually the exact same thing as using user defaults and the same commands. But I am going to go over them again, just in case you didn't watch the last video, so that you know how to actually use it. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to create a label, and I'm going to center it using constraints in the middle of my view. That way, if I open it on another device size, then it will still be centered. Then below it, I'm going to have a text field right here, and I'm going to drag it below my label. I will make it a little bit wider, and I will add some constraints so it is this amount of vertical spacing, so it will be a total of 40 points below it, and then I will also center it horizontally. Okay, and now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button below it, right here, and I will call this, or I will put the text inside of it to submit. Okay, so basically what this is going to do is the label is going to save. So when I type in something into my text box and I click submit, it's going to update the label to what I type into it. Also, it's going to save what I type inside of my text field to the keychain wrapper. So then next time I open the app, my label will automatically be filled with what I typed in before. So that way, if you were to do this normally and not save and retrieve from the keychain wrapper, your label would be back to its default setting. When you close the app and reopen it, it will not save what the label was set to. But using the keychain wrapper, it will, and it will save that information and save that data. So that is what we're going to do. So to connect these three UI elements to my actual code, my view controller file, I'm going to click on these lines in the top right, and I'm going to click Assistant. This opens up the Assistant editor. I can then connect by either control clicking and dragging or right clicking on the element and then dragging it over above the viewDidLoad function. I will have this connection as an outlet, and I'll just call this text label, just like that. And it creates a variable for it. And because of this, you can see it's connected to my storyboard. I'm going to do the same thing for my input field, or the text field. I will just call it input field for now. Okay? And now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect my button. However, instead of connecting it using an IB outlet, I'm actually going to connect it using an IB action. That way, when I click on the button, something actually occurs. So I'm going to right click and drag from my button over to my code. And my connection's already set to action. And I will name this button pressed. That'll be the name of my function. And the trigger is going to be touch up inside. Okay? Now that I've connected the three elements to my code, I can close out of my assistant editor using this X symbol right here. And then I'm just going to go into the view controller file. That way it's nice and zoomed in for me. Okay, so once I am here, I want to, when my button's pressed, right, I want to take the text label, the text inside of the text label, and I want to set it to the text inside of my input field. So I will say text label.text equals input field.text, just like that. So now I can run my project just to show you what actually happens. I'm going to run it on an iPhone 11 simulator. And when I run it the first time, it may take a little bit of time to open, but afterward it should be good to go. Let's see. Okay, so it opens and let's see what happens. Okay, you can see it shows up here. So now if I were to type in something into my field, such as dog, and I click submit, you will see that the label changes to what I typed in. Now let's say I typed in, let's just say tree, right? And I submit, you can see that it now changes. If I were to close out of my app, like this, close out of my app, and reopen it, you will see that it does not save. So now the saving part in Keychain is what we're going to do. So I'm going to go back to my code over here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to import the actual class for the pod that I installed, which is called KeychainWrapper. I'm going to say import SwiftKeychainWrapper, just like that on the top. And that will allow me to now use the contents of this particular module. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my button press function, and I'm going to type in KeychainWrapper.standard, and this is the default access .set, just like that. Now the set command the set function allows us to set certain data into our keychain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this one, which says set value, which is a string type for key string, just like that. And so what I want to actually set into my keychain is going to be the input field.text, right? Because that's what I'm trying to save. So I can type that in again, input field.text. And that is what I'm setting in my keychain. But now I need to have some sort of identifier for that data, because once I put it in Keychain, when I go back into Keychain later, I need to be able to find it, take the data, and then access it out. And so in order to do that, we have to provide a key so that we can access this data using that same key later. So I'm going to set my key for now. I'm just going to call this sample key underscore input field, something like that. This is now my key. I will now save the data into KeychainWrapper using this key, and then later when I want to retrieve it, I'm going to use this key to actually retrieve it. And now the last thing you see here is there's an error that says value of optional type string must be unwrapped. So this is basically saying that if there is no text, then we need to somehow handle that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say question mark, and then to just a empty string. So what does this mean? This means that if the value of this is nil, right, which basically means that there's nothing there, then I will set its default to an empty string. So when I use these two question marks, it allows me to set a default in case this doesn't exist. And that allows me to prevent an error. Okay, so now that I've actually set it, when my app opens, I want to be able to retrieve that text back out. So to the code, where I put the code to run when the app actually starts opening is inside of the viewDidLoad, right? Because the viewDidLoad is the first function that loads when my entire screen loads. So I want in my viewDidLoad to try to retrieve data from my keychain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in let to create a variable, or in this case a constant variable. I'll say let keychain data equals keychain wrapper. So I use the same keychain wrapper as below when I was setting it, dot standard again, and then this time instead of dot set, I'm going to do dot and then the data type of what I'm trying to take out of the keychain. In this case, because I set a string into my keychain wrapper, I have to do standard.string to actually retrieve it back out. And then you see here, I have this for key again. And this is where I use the same key that I used to set the data in to get the data out. Then it can match it up and then work properly. So now I've created a new constant named keychain data that gets a string data from my keychain out using this key. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now do an if statement. I'm going to say if keychain data is not equal to nothing, meaning that I was able to get something out, then I'm going to say my text label dot text equals keychain data, just like that. And then I'm going to say else. I'm going to have an else statement. And in the else statement, I'm going to say label text, or text label dot text equals input text here. So this is kind of the default. If I'm not able to get anything out of my keychain, for example, the first time I'm running the app where I never actually saved anything in the first place, this is the text that's going to show up. It's a simple if statement. Okay, so now that we have completed the code, I'm going to run the app again, and I'm going to see how it works. Okay, I'm actually going to change this. You see how nothing appeared there. I'm going to change this from not equal to nothing. I'm going to say not equal to nil instead, because nil means both nothing and... Okay, you can see now that input text here is now inside of my label because this is the first time I'm running the app. Now, if I were to type in something like dog, you can see that my text has changed to dog. If I were to close out of my app and reopen my app, you can see that it appears. And that is all done using the iOS keychain. So SwiftKeychainWrapper is actually one of the best ways, in my opinion, to store data, especially data such as a little bit more sensitive data, simply because it's slightly more secure than using user defaults. Because SwiftKeychainWrapper uses iOS Keychain and Apple has a lot of security features with Keychain, it's much more secure than user defaults, which actually any app can access. So with the Keychain wrapper, only the app that is supposed to access the data can access the data, really. And unless they know the really long key, well, with user defaults, there could potentially be more security problem. So if you are implementing a feature such as save passwords, it's probably better to do it using the Swift keychain wrapper rather than the NS user defaults. And in general, because Swift keychain wrapper is very easy to use. It's pretty much the only code that actually changes between this and using user defaults is what you put right here, where I highlighted. Because for user defaults, I say userdefaults.standard.string, for example. In this case, I use keychainwrapper.standard.string. But in my opinion, I think that Swift Keychain Wrapper is a wonderful framework. I have used it myself, and it is definitely very easy to use, very easy to implement, and is much more secure than using user defaults. All right, well, I hope that this was helpful. If you liked the video, feel free to like and subscribe for more content. I definitely want to continue this series weekly, which is going to be the Framework Fridays. And if you do happen to come across any frameworks that you like yourself or you want to learn, definitely leave them in the comment section below or message me, and I will be able to take a look at it and possibly feature it on Framework Fridays. As always, thanks for watching and have a good day.